Hello, and welcome back to Unbossed, the show where we're flipping the script on what leadership looks like and redefining success with care, connection, and courage. Today's guest is someone I deeply respect. His name is Jason. He's a leader in corporate America who has been championing heart-based leadership in spaces where that's not always welcome. If you've ever tried to bring more compassion into a tough workplace, and have been told to tone it down, this one is for you. Welcome, Jason, to the Heart Prophet Unbossed show.
Thank you so much, Stacy, for that very warm and welcoming introduction. I'm so happy to be here.
Absolutely. And of course, my co host is with me, Gloria from HPWP. Always happy to have her with us. She has been teaching compassionate leadership for 30 years. So we're in good company when it comes to doing something new
Excellent.
in the world in compassionate leadership space. Can you talk about where you started? Because you were in corporate America, so obviously you were trained by corporate America, which was not compassionate leadership. At what point did you have a turning point where you said, "This doesn't feel right anymore, and I don't want to do this. I want to do it my way"?
I've always done it my way, Stacy. My father was in the military. We traveled around a lot. I moved a lot. Um, I felt disconnected. I felt lonely. I was the kid in the new school that was sitting off by himself on the bleachers and nobody was talking to him. I started to learn about my own abilities and stepping into the things I can control, right? So at a young age, I was exposed to some mindset work, some paradigm shift stuff, win-win situation, little leadership stuff. And it was really to help me get through my parents' divorce and feeling like I was abandoned. And I just could notice those things in people, right? If you drive a red truck, you see red trucks. And so I see those people in the world and I know that they're hurting because I've been hurting before, right? And so I just, leadership for me is about self. And you can't focus on the people that disagree with you. Like you can't change people. Like just understanding that and accepting that is huge. It's very significant. And we get so stuck on trying to change the minds of others that we spend our time there. And there is a whole community of people just waiting for you to speak with them and connect with them. And when we spend our energy in other places, we miss those opportunities. And then we get frustrated, we get defeated. And so, just show up.
So
No,
you
tell me
you got
more.
promoted through the ranks because you were producing, then you managed people and they were producing. So you're having all
Right.
this success. And then at what point did you what was your next role after leading people? Then what happened?
Yeah.
Just tell us the story about that.
Yeah. So I never wanted to be a corporate leader. I never set out to be a leader. I just kept getting promoted, and then I woke up one day and I was like, I'm in charge. But it was like that was the reality. It was like I woke up one day and I was like, how did I get here? And I had to learn business. I mean, I knew the basics of business, but I had to learn how to read a P&L and all the stuff. And so from my mid 20s to my mid 40s, I managed probably three, four different teams in different states. And I notice patterns, right? And I think we all have hindsight, right? We look back and we see these patterns of success and top percent of the company and delivering results and what caused that. And and so when I met my current boss, who has been in corporate for a long time, a couple of decades, um, he met with me and he's like, "What do you want to do? What's your career path?" And I didn't want to lead a P&L anymore. I didn't want to operate a business anymore. And I told him that because my natural trajectory would have been on to be like an area manager and and on up the ladder. And I didn't want to do that. I saw people in pain. My team was having fun and we were delivering fantastic results. And I saw people on other teams that weren't having fun. And I could tell they were hurting personally, professionally. People get fired because there's lack of communication, all the stuff, lack of collaboration. And so he asked me, what do you want, what do you want to do with your career? And I said, I want to help managers be better people leaders. And essentially, he slid me a blank piece of paper and said, "Tell me what your job description is going to be. What's your title going to be?" And so I had somebody that believed in me. Well, at least he believed in my financial results, right? You can't not deny the results. Like it's like scoreboard, right? Look at the scoreboard. And I came out of the gate with guns a-blazing, right? And a lot of people didn't understand what I was saying. And I've learned sometimes I go right into the deep end, and sometimes I just have to kind of tiptoe in and feel it out, right? Know your audience. And so it's been a journey. It's been a real journey. Trying to build a bridge from corporate structure to what people need. And I could go through a lot of in-depth about just our learning process as human beings to corporate learning and where the disconnect is. And then I would come in and try to connect those dots to human learning because it's all about our experience. We do a lot of training that's a short video, and people just don't retain that. Like you watch a video or you watch a speaker and you get amped up, you get jazzed, you get inspired.
Mhm.
And then every day that passes, you forget a little bit more and more and more. You can remember how you felt during that presentation, but you can't remember what was discussed. You're just like, I want more, but I don't even know what I want because I can't remember it. And so our learning is experiential, right? When we touch a hot stove, we remember. When we fall off our bike, we remember. And then we have to do things, and it's about keep showing up, keep practicing, right? And so um, I know that you wanted me to kind of go down this journey, and I'm a little bit all over the place. That's in my nature. But it goes back to this, understanding that leadership is not about others, it's about self. Like you referenced my shirt. It's written backwards and intentionally because when I look in the mirror, the shirt is for me,
Mm.
right? So when I look in the mirror, it reads correct. It says be human. And it's a reminder to be authentic, treat people like human beings. And but our brains are smart, so you were able to read it, by looking at it, even though
Mhm.
it's written backwards. And so it's a reflection t-shirt, right? And so that's it is you know to remind ourselves that we're all human beings. We're all trying to make our way. And look, there are a lot of struggles in corporate. I said to our CEO a few years ago, heart-centered leadership, and he looked at me like I had two heads. And he's like, Jason, I've heard this term, people believe it, or people say it, but you believe it. And I said, absolutely. We didn't really discuss much further what that meant. And it really means to be grounded, to be centered, align your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions. That's what it means to be truly authentic. When you show up with in action how you feel and how you what you believe, and those things are aligned. That's what it means to be purposeful and authentic. And look, is every moment like that? No.
Right.
Are there times that I'm a train wreck? Yes, I'm human too. But there's always going to be distractions in the world. Like, I remember as a kid, my uncle was teaching me some of this mindset stuff back in the late 80s. And he says, Jason, when you go to the park and you hear the birds chirping and the sun shining on your face, and you're just kind of being very present in the moment. And I said, yeah, it's beautiful. And he says, and then that plane flies overhead, and then your distraction goes to the plane because there's always going to be planes. He goes, it's about coming back to the present moment, having awareness, right? There's always going to be challenges. Life doesn't get any easier. You just get better at it, right?
Mhm.
And that's
Yeah.
by practicing. A friend of mine said, practice makes perfect. We've heard this, right? And I said, yeah, of course. Whether you're learning to play the guitar, learning how to play soccer, practice, practice, practice makes perfect. And he said, practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. The real question is what are you practicing? And that has stuck with me. And so what are we practicing? Right? Are we practicing connection? And because people want to be engaged, people want you to engage them. Like humans are resilient, humans are amazing, all people. But if we don't give them an opportunity to be that person and make that psychologically safe environment for them to be that person, they're always going to be suppressed. They're going to give you very little. And then you wonder why your financials aren't great. And then you fire them, you hire, and then people are saying, oh, we got to find better people. We got to hire better people. We got to get the right people on the bus. Well, have you given the people that are on the bus the opportunity to show up? And that's
Mhm.
creating space. That's listening. That's, there's so many things that go into that. And
Mhm.
so, those of you that are on this, your listeners that are on this journey, just find your people. Like for me, it was tough, really tough. I had some lonely, dark moments going down this journey by myself. But then I started listening to podcasts, and then I hear people and I'm like, oh, I got to know that person. Then I would follow them on social, and then I would message with them. And then I got involved in a group of people, and now I belong to 3 or 4 different groups of people all around the world. And we meet regularly, and sometimes we just chat and we talk about our struggles. We talk about what leadership means. We talk about how did we show up yesterday? What could we have done different? Because we're all learning. You know,
Mhm.
we're not perfect, right? God didn't create us that way, or source, or higher power, or whatever you believe in. And so you just got to find your people, because a big part of it is courage. And unless somebody comes along and you feel like you're like, okay, change, right? People are afraid of change. We've heard this. I don't think people are necessarily afraid of change. They're afraid of going through change alone, right? So if you're alone and there's something unknown, you feel isolated, you feel vulnerable. But if there's a group of people going
Yeah.
through change
Yes.
together, then you have support, you have psychological safety.
What was some of the resistance that you got either from your direct boss in doing that or from other leaders or people in the organization as you were trying to flip the script, so to speak, in terms of um, how leadership is defined and how we care for people?
Yeah, it was a tough journey. When I first got into the role, uh, like I didn't even really have the language or to know what I was going to be doing, other than just to go out and connect with people. And I knew some basic things about the learning process, but it really comes back to this law of diffusion of innovation that I mentioned. Like this is the blueprint for what we're trying to do here. That uh, um, it's this bell curve, right? And so I don't know if your listeners are familiar, but look it up, the law of diffusion of innovation. And there's innovators that make up about 2.5% of the population. And then there's early adopters that make up about 13.5% of the population, right? Those early adopters believe what you believe, and they're not going to be the first, but when they see somebody jump, they go because they believe what you believe, right? And then you're always going to have at the other end of the spectrum people who, we call the law of innovation, the law of diffusion of innovation calls them the laggards. Those are the people that are resistant to change. They're not going to change unless they absolutely have to. And in the middle, you have the mass majority. So you have the um, early majority and the late majority, and that makes up about 68% of the population. And so, just like if you were to look at your team or your employees, you're going to have a couple of high performers, people that believe what you believe. You're going to have the people that are just kind of going through and saying, okay, yeah. And then you're going to have the people that are bucking the system, that are anti-culture. They're trying to be, sabotage. And so, if we focus on those early adopters, then once you reach 15 to 16% buy-in of the population, something happens and people start to shift. And that mass majority they may think that I'm crazy, but and they're not going to buy in necessarily what I'm buying in. But when they start to see their friends who believe what I believe buy in, then they shift, and they're only there because their friends are doing it too. And they want to be part of something greater than themselves, right? Because that's a natural human, just like Staci was talking about tribes, right? As like it's in our DNA, it's our biological makeup to be part of something bigger than ourselves. And and so that really is the blueprint for navigating change. And so, go ahead. Yeah.
I'm very curious. This is fascinating to me. So you were the early innovator. You're speaking these things
Yeah.
to other people. So you were dealing with that whole population, like the early adopters, then the late adopters, then the non-adopters, or whatever they're called at the very end.
Yeah.
What kind of resistance did you receive from, say, the mid to the late people, and how did you deal with that?
Yeah. It was tough because before I knew about the law of diffusion of innovation, because innovation is about solving a problem, right? And so before I
Mhm.
even knew about this, I was focused on changing the people that didn't want to be changed.
Mm,
And it's tiring. It is weathering the storm, it's being in the drought, being in the hail. I mean, it is isolated.
mhm,
And when I met some people, right, like I got involved in different groups, I started learning about these things. Then it's like, oh, well, I'm just going to continue to focus on the people that have ears for me, right?
mm,
So I started I started doing some things that were completely voluntary. So I would have a meeting invite sent out to all the managers. I said, this is not mandatory. Show up if you want to show up. And so I'd send it to 65 people, 20 would show up. And then I would talk to them. And then when we get off the call, those people go back and they'll say, oh, that's fantastic. It's a great conversation. And then next time there's 25 people on the call. Next time there's 30 people on the call. And so it's this shift that you've got to make it, you can't change people, you can't force people, you can't make people do stuff. So I would have meetings that were completely voluntary, right? Your day is so busy. I know. I've seen your calendar. It's stacked with meetings all day. And but if you make it voluntary and it's something somebody believes in, they will figure out how to be there. And so I would do that. We would record it and I would post it on our team's channel, internal, and somebody, then I start to watch. There's viewers, right? And so people aren't showing up to the meeting, but they're curious and they're viewing. And so there was always, a micro moment, a micro lesson. Sometimes I would have guests that were internal that did something really well. And so I connected the dots to our corporate initiatives, things we're trying to accomplish. But then we would have this holistic conversation, and it just kind of grew organically. Now, I don't do that anymore because some things shifted for me. There were, again, leaders were like, Jason needs to focus on some other things. And so things were put on my plate. And I went through that again, being out alone and feeling like I was defeated. And then finally, I just said, I'm not doing it anymore, or I don't want to do it anymore. This is the thing and that's when we came back and said, oh, because now, just because you've tried something and it failed, fast forward 3 years, times are different. You bring up
right.
that same thing again. It's like, oh, let's lean in a little bit because something's here, like something's happening, right? So you have to you have to be diligent. You have to not right, don't give up, don't stop. Um, and sometimes it's pivot and take a different approach. And that approach is, it's because if we're going trying to go through change again, um, in numbers, in groups, it's easier. So it's
Right.
find your people. They're out there. Find your people.
What do you think some of the leaders that you've trained in your position here, what has been some of the challenges that they've faced that you've been able to help them walk through?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is we try to make change, or we try to do it differently within the old structure. And
Yes.
you can't do that, right? So like, I always like analogies, and you can't take a car and So there's these autonomous vehicles now, right? There's autonomous rideshare vehicles, and if you haven't ridden in one, it's an experience. So I got in an autonomous vehicle, and there's things that control there's sensors everywhere, right? But you can't take a normal gas powered with a motor in it vehicle and slap some solar panels on it and say we're going to make it electric, right? You've got to pull out a ton of stuff and you got to put in stuff, right? So like there's nobody sitting behind the wheel. I sat in the passenger seat, right? There's an empty seat next to me and the wheel's turning, right? Something else was put on there to help navigate that, right? So you've got to, so when I think about that, and then I think about corporate structure and teamwork, we have to unlearn things before we can learn things, right? You have to make space. You have to any progress, any movement of going forward in the history of everything, you have to let go of the old way.
Mm-hmm.
And people want to hold on to the old way and bring that with them and go, okay, tell me how to do this better, tell me to do this better. And it's like, no, you have to set that down. And so, like, I'll tell you a short story or a quick story. There was a different leader that was, complaining to me about one of my people not doing things the way that they should be doing things. And that person had great customer retention, had was number two in sales on my team, um, like hitting all the metrics, right? Right, that person. And so I went back to the other manager and I said, "Hey, what are our goals? We're a corporation, we're a company, right? It's like what do our shareholders want from us? They want us to have high retention, they want us to have high sales, they want us to put as much money in the bank as we can, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
retention, sales, profit, like those are the goals. This individual that you're complaining about is one of the best people that I have that does those three things. So forget about how he's doing them, like integrity, right? Like we're not breaking any laws. He's doing it differently. And you're stuck in managing people to a structure that prevents them from excelling, right? So you have to be able to kind of bend that mold, just like the autonomous vehicle. Just you have to be able to let go of some things that aren't going to serve you.
Mm-hmm.
And we always keep the goal in mind, right? Where are we going? What's the vision? What are the things we want to achieve? And then we have to be open to maybe it looks a little different, right? Because what's the saying? Insanity is right, the Einstein
Doing the
saying,
same
right?
thing over and over, expecting different results.
Yeah. And the people that create a structure that maybe worked well 15 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
but unless they've opened their mind, those aren't the same people that are going to create the new structure, but often they are the ones trying to create the new structure.
Mm-hmm.
Like you want different results, you have to think differently. And so sometimes that means, for me, being part of my being a leader, like here's a tip that leaders can do that aren't going to involve their superiors or create waves. So when I would get problems or situations that needed to be resolved, I would go into the conference room with my team. Nobody else, no other leaders. My boss isn't in the room. It's my team, right? And I would put the problem on the table and go around and say, how can we solve this? And what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts? Right? I wouldn't give my solution. I would just listen to everybody's solution and then say, yeah, I like that. I like that. I like that. Can we piece this together and come up with this new solution? And we would do that. And then we would go execute and we would be successful. And my boss would come to me and he'd say, nice job on fixing the problem. And I would say, I didn't fix the problem. My people fixed the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So instead of so you, in the shadows, unseen, we would we would do things differently. And then when the highlight came and said, "Oh, Jason did a fantastic job of fixing the problem," I would say, "No, no, I gave that to so and so and so and so and so and so. Those three fixed the problem together. They collaborated. They worked on it. They ran it by me. I was aligned. It wasn't what we traditionally do, but I wanted to give them the space, and it made sense. And they went and kicked butt, right? And so then the leader starts to see, oh, so they did something differently and they still hit on the financials Okay, whatever that means. Keep doing that. And so you
Whatever
create
it
a
is.
little, right? So it wasn't like I went back to my boss and said, "Hey, I want to give this project to the team and let them do it." No, no, no. They need to be focused on, right? Like that will happen. So I didn't ask for permission. I mean, I was in a role that allowed me to manage my team,
Mhm.
and I just managed it a little differently. So I was the filter from the corporate folks to my team, and I approached it differently with them. And and look, sometimes you got to start off with small projects, and if there's a failure, you got to be able to jump in, and so it's not a failure that's highlighted
Right.
outside, right? So it's
Yeah.
creating that safety, right? A
Yeah.
circle of
Yeah.
safety.
Right. And you have to have those foundational pieces. So there is a
Yep.
structure shift. I love the analogy of the autonomous car because any car could be an autonomous car, but it takes a whole lot of restructuring the car to make it
Yeah,
effective in that, right? So that's
that's
kind of the
that's
same
right.
thing. Like any leader can be a compassionate leader, but there is a framework that makes it more successful when you have that framework.
And
Yeah,
one of
and by the yeah,
and
go
one of
ahead.
the key things that you said is sometimes we have to unlearn
Yeah.
things.
Yeah,
And that goes against conventional wisdom, right? Learning is growing. It reminded me of this Adam Grant quote because I think he's just brilliant. And the quote goes this way: it takes curiosity to learn, it takes courage to unlearn. Learning requires the humility to admit what you don't know today. Unlearning
yeah,
requires the integrity to admit that you were wrong yesterday. Learning is how you evolve.
yeah,
Unlearning is how you keep up as the world evolves.
Hmm.
And we're living in a changing world. And so we have to constantly keep challenging ourselves with, I think you said it earlier, Jason, what serves us well today doesn't necessarily serve us well tomorrow.
yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah. And then, by the way, when you give your people a project and you let them kind of solve it, and of course, as the leader, you need to put up some guidelines, right? Put up the real.
The guardrails.
think he locked up.
Yeah. Jason, you're there.
The rail guards and greater.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Awesome. Well, Jason, this has been amazing. I think we could always learn a lot from you, and I love your analogies and the way that you say things. But I thank you for your honesty and your integrity and for being living proof that heart-based leadership isn't just idealist, it is effective. You're producing results with the humanistic, compassionate leadership. Where can people connect with you? If somebody resonates with you and they want to learn from you and they want to be a part of your life, how do they connect with you?
Yeah, thanks, Stacy. And I just thank you for allowing me to be here. And Gloria, thank you so much for allowing me to be here. I spend a lot of, well, not as much lately, but I spend most of my time on LinkedIn. So that's a good spot. I do have a little website that I'm not really doing anything with. It's just kind of this brand, um, the Heart Center Leader, so the hcleader.com. And then my podcast, which is, I used to be very regimented about it, and now I'm just kind of interviewing people and putting out. So I probably need to be more consistent in that space. But it's Lead with Your Heart, the Lead with Your Heart podcast. And Stacy, you were a guest not too long ago. But yeah, that's where
Beautiful.
you can find me.
Awesome.
And
Awesome.
I'm happy to talk to anybody that has ears that wants
That's
to
amazing.
that wants to engage.
And we love having you talk because it makes such a difference and it's an impact in the world that you're right, you're ahead of your time. And so being able to glean the knowledge and wisdom from you is fantastic. So to those of you that are listening, if you've ever felt alone trying to do leadership differently, let Jason's story remind you that you're not crazy. You're just ahead of your time. Although the time is coming that you're not going to be ahead of your time, but you're on the leading edge of time. Keep leading with heart and keep being unbossed. We love you. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.